If we love to draw architecture, we probably love to draw grand architecture as well. But when I look at drawings of really ornate buildings, such as this section of the Musée du Louvre, I see a common problem, is that the artist has got tangled up with the detail, with the decorative elements, in a way that the overall effect is less than realistic. Let me show you an easy way to overcome this problem. And this is the second video I've made on this subject. And I've taken my examples at what I call an intermediate level. And if you find this helpful, you might want to go on to the next video I'm making, which will be looking at this with more advanced examples. My tip for overcoming getting distracted by and lost in the detail is to start our drawing by focusing on the basic shapes that make it up. To try and reduce our building into a series of boxes, of spheres, of pyramids, to help us understand the overall shape of the building, the proportions of those various parts of the building, as well as how they align. So with this section of the Musée du Louvre, I would be seeing this front section as a box. At this point, we're not really concerned about being overly accurate with things such as perspective, but it certainly doesn't hurt to start imagining the perspective. So we have a box that represents this front section, and we also have a box that comes in from the side. And then in this section, we have another box that sits in front. Now we have these two rows of double columns, and the way I like to think of these as being a solid block coming out. And then within this, our columns sit. And down below, of course. On the roof, as a pyramid with its top cut off. Can't see this line at all. It sits completely behind this very fancy dormer window. But what we can think of is this window. We see that it's as wide as from here to here. And it sits back in something of a wedge shape. And then there's basically a pyramid shape of sculptures on the top. And we also have these two caryatids that again I think of as coming out from our sides in a solid block of stone that then get carved back into it. And then we can see that on the corners we have these blocks that actually align with the decorative stonework underneath, which have more statuary on them. These curving supports come down from under the cornice and onto the top of this overhanging cornice on top of this entablature. And then into these spaces we can now place the various more detailed decorative elements. And with something such as these Corinthian capitals, if I have a column shaft such as this coming up, what I like to do is to imagine these columns in a blocked out form. And if I look up here, I can see in fact that down the side here, they really come out and overhang the edge on both sides. And on this side, I have a corner here. But by visualizing the basic shape of this column without worrying about the acanthus leaves curving over, helps me to get the proportions correct and the overall shape correct of the capital. Quite a complex form in itself. So how does visualizing the basic shapes help us understand the main tower that we have here at the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum in Glasgow? Well, we have a series of boxes stacked on top of each other. And then we have a smaller box on top. On the very top, we have this round tower. But in fact, it's not round. What I like to do is visualize looking down on objects. And when I look down on this tower, I can see that it's a square with the corners cut off. It's an 8-sided prism, an octagonal prism, with a column attached on each wall. I can imagine this tower as a rectangular prism with the corners cut off. And then on each corner we have a column. And we can actually just see the columns partly on the sides. And then above each column we have the cornice actually coming out. And again, this can be quite a tricky shape to draw, but if I can imagine in my mind how it's formed, it gives me a better chance of accurately capturing this detail. And then on top of this, I actually have another small box as the bottom part of the very top of the tower. Working out where these ribs join this square tower at the top is important. In fact, what we can see, here we have our octagonal prism there. Here we have our octagonal prism up the top, and this is how they connect up. So perfectly drawn, each of these segments would look the same. And then on top of this, we have our four-sided box. The other detail where visualizing the basic shape and structure is important is in these four small towers that we have down here on our corners. If we think of looking down on them, we see that we have a square base, but where the corners have been cut off in a quarter circle fashion. The columns on each side have been arranged just inside of where that corner has been removed. But what this means is that visually we associate the two corner columns more strongly than we associate the two columns on the same side, because they're in effect grouped together and seen more easily together. And our roof line also has these same scalloped corners. And if we can visualize how this roof is going to look as its basic shape, not distorted, it helps us then to draw more accurately whatever distortion the perspective will give us. We've drawn our tower a little bit big for the space we have, but this is where this is incredibly helpful in doing some preliminary thinking and sketching. It helps us get a sense of the proportions and how we're going to need to adjust our initial perceptions as we move on. What basic shapes do I need to visualize here with Notre Dame? From this angle, the most significant shapes is this block going across here and this block coming out towards us. This block, the transept of the church, is basically a rectangular prism. We can't see from this view exactly how far down it goes. But we can see that if we were looking down on this rectangular prism going across like that, we can see that from the center we have another structure coming off with a rounded end. And so that's what we have here. And then quite significantly, we have the roof structure on top. So this is our basic shape. And then from this, we can see that at the base of these windows, in fact, what appears to happen is that there is another lower section that actually protrudes from this one. And then from about here, we have these flying buttresses that come out in between these windows. And these come out and line up with just below this here. This one, because it's severely foreshortened, we don't see much at all. And then on the top of each of these buttressed supports, there is a decorative spire. And then this goes around on the other side as well. And there are going to be, from this one, 1, 2, 3, 4 buttresses going around that corner because they line up with this here, and I can count those. And then in the center, what do we make of this spire? Well, the important thing again is to work out how many sides does it have, and I can tell from looking at this that again it has 8 equal sides, but I can also see that as it rises it narrows. Now there is a massive decoration on this spire, but we might look at this spire in the advanced video of looking at the basic shapes within architectural structures. But by getting this sense of this portion of the building coming out and of these flying buttresses fanning out in all direction, it helps us to understand how it works before we start to get bogged down in all of the details and all the decorative finials and carvings and the effect of the recesses within the deep walls of the various windows and the like. It also helps us if we at this point are just seeing the two towers as just that two towers. But look, I'll just put in the, looking at something such as that. We're seeing our two towers firstly as being rectangular prisms, but again we realize that if we look down on the top, our square tower at the corners has a number of planes worked into it, and how much detail we want to go with those does depend on the scale of our drawing and the style of our line work, how loose and gestural our line work is going to be versus how precise and accurate. Here we have the front of the Secessionist building in Vienna. How can we understand the basic shapes of this? I would probably want to see this lower section here as all one section. And then into this front section we have this inset. We probably want to take this a bit further. And then on top sits another box. And then this box has another box coming out from it. And then on top of that we have this incredible filigree gilded wrought iron ball. And then we cut into the building, if you like, this inset entrance. But in some ways it's helpful to understand this upper section as a stand to support the wrought iron, and particularly with non-standard shapes such as these. It's helpful to do some thumbnail sketches and to try and represent the building without all the detail, which we can't wait to start drawing. But we will enjoy drawing the detail if we've captured the basic shape of the building and the proportions in a way that there is room for the detail to be drawn on.